Here's what we're going to be doing. I've got my little flashlight here, and we're going to be telling ghost stories this morning. And that's, I think, the fun thing is on the street. Obviously, one of the best parts about going to a summer camp or having some, camp counselors or getting out there with the friends is to tell those ghost stories at night. So I'm going to ask people on the street for their favorite ghost stories, or I will take as an option, instead of ghost stories, I will take ghosting stories. So if you've ever done some online dating, chatting with a guy or a girl, and they just kind of disappear, poof into midair, that's called ghosting, and we've talked about it plenty on the show. I'm going to get some of those ghosting stories here as well. I wanted to mention where we are right now near the Chicago River because there is a famous ghost story associated with exactly where we are. Right at the river, right at the Chicago River where we are, was the site of the Eastland disaster. It was on July 24th, 1915, so we're approaching the 103rd anniversary. I think a lot of people know this story, but it was right in front of the Britannia building where we are. The Eastland, which was a giant ship that ferried people across the river, actually never even left the Chicago River. It was docked along Clark Street and the Chicago River, and it capsized, and tragedy really struck because more than 2,500 passengers were on the ship, and 844 people died right here in the Chicago River when it capsized. It was tied to the dock, and tragedy struck, it tipped over. So obviously very tragic, that many people losing their lives, but the ghost stories remain today about hauntings near the river, sightings at night of people near the river, the thoughts of screams. So that's a very classic haunted story or a ghost story here in Chicago. So I've got my flashlight, we're gonna be doing ghosting stories, and guess what? If you tell a ghosting story, I've got s'mores for you. No, I actually have Pop-Tarts with s'mores flavors. No one seemed to like the idea of us having open flame around downtown and putting some s'mores on here. What's better than one John, but two Johns? And John, you also spell your name Jon. How you doing this morning?
Great, how are you?
You have the best, can you face the camera? Look at this mustache we have here this morning. All right, John, what's the deal with your mustache?
I have a deal with God.
What's the deal with God?
The deal is, he does all the growing, I just wash and wax it.
It looks great. Is it hard in this high humidity or no?
It's terrible.
Yeah, so how often do you have to redo it?
When I get to work.
All right, well, I'll let you send it in your May way, John. Thank you very much.
Take care.
John from Wheaton with the awesome mustache. The captain here of the fire department, and we're talking about a ghost story here in Chicago, and he totally denies this whole thing. But I'm about to tell you a Chicago ghost story. You guys ready for this ghost story? Here we go. All right, so this is the fire department. This is district number 1. And again, the fire captain and all the fire people deny it. And this used to be the site of an old prison in the late 19th century from about 1872 to 1927. A famous prison once stood here, and in fact, people were actually hung here. Over 100 convicts were hung, including once the story of the mayor's assassin. Mayor Carter Harrison was assassinated in the 19th century, and Patrick Prendergast was hanged here. He was thought to be mentally ill. He often complained that the prison was haunted. In fact, one person was hung here, but the rope snapped in half as he dropped to the ground, so they had to hang him again, and he still haunts the ground. Now, I just talked to some of the fire officers, or the firefighters, who did not want to be on TV here this morning. They deny the whole thing. They see some weird stuff here downtown, but it has nothing to do with ghosts. And the captain just said, no, it's not our building, it's the courthouse behind the building that's really haunted. So that's your Chicago ghost story. We're gonna have more coming up in just a little bit. How spooky, be sure to tell it around the campfire. I got Patrick here from Edgewater. Patrick, how you doing today?
I'm doing quite well. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. I'm asking for haunted ghost stories, and yours comes out of New Jersey, right?
Indeed.
You want to hold the flashlight like this?
You go
I'll
right
do
ahead.
that. All right, Patrick, you tell us the story.
Well, this was out at the hangar at Lakehurst, New Jersey, which has long been reported to be haunted. It's where the U.S. Navy used to fly their airships out of there. It's where the Hindenburg crashed.
Ooh.
And so there have been a lot of people who have either died there or who have departed from there never to return.
Ooh.
So
and you were out there, right?
I was out there for an event that was supposed to take place outside. There was a nor'easter, a big storm out there. We had to do it in the hangar in the evening, and by the time the event was finished, it was dark.
Ooh, dark. Was it misty outside?
It was misty outside.
Misty.
It was misty inside.
Misty inside.
The hangar is so big that it kind of has its own microclimates, so there's mists in layers across this thing.
And did you see anything?
Well, I heard some things rattling around, but what I had beside me were people who had been out there plenty of times before and who began to relate stories to me about how people had seen disembodied heads floating around at night, when nobody else was around.
But you didn't see any disembodied heads?
I didn't see any disembodied heads, but I gotta say, I can see how people would.
Okay, all right, we like that, Patrick. That was haunted enough. You have a great day at work.